Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we are going to take a look at painting Duinclaw from Elathain Soulraiders for Warhammer Underworlds Direchasm. You can see here we've got the little guy all primed up with Stynorez White. We're going to start things off with some Nagroth Night, some McCraig Blue, and we're basically going to mix these in a 1-to-2 ratio, 1 blue to 2 purple. We may even add a drop of Lamian Medium to this. I think it's just 1 drop, maybe 2. I think it's just 1. Give it a quick little mix onto our palette and begin our base coating process. Here I'm just simply using my shade wash brush as a base coating brush because I'm just quickly scrubbing it around onto the model surface, and basically we're going to have to apply more than 1 coat so that we get fairly even coverage. The whole point of adding the slight amount of blue is because I didn't want a purely purple color. I wanted it to shift a little bit more towards the blue side of things. There used to be a really fantastic color way back in the day that was like this color, and I'm kind of a big fan of that. It's not made anymore. Maybe one day, I don't know. But either way, you can see here it's going fairly straightforward, and of course the little fella is not fully attached to his base, so we can pull him off of the base if need be to get into his belly and soft bits. I initially did that because, well, I was thinking that maybe I would do something different down there, or I was going to have like a tonal gradient down there, something bright. You know, his belly's kind of bright and his, carapace is kind of, darker and what have you. But I decided, nobody's going to see it anyway, so I'm just going to, put some color on it. You'll notice that I don't put all the color all the way down his claws, really pretty much to the tips of his claws, because, we're going to come in with some Screamer Pink here. And basically with this, we're going to slap this on. I've already made another batch of that same mixture of the blue-purple. And with this, I'm going to start laying this down fairly generously. And I want to have a nice little gradient running along his claws and along the edge, the perimeter of his carapace on his head and everything like that. So I take a little bit of the mixed purple color, and basically I do a wet on wet blend with the wet Screamer Pink, and if need be I just simply mix it right onto my brush and then just blend it out and push it as far as I think I need to go, which is almost pretty much to the shoulder on this arm. And initially I was thinking of basically having the one claw be brighter than the other, just to show difference. And I was initially thinking the smaller claw should be brighter, but then I kind of liked the idea of the big claw being more of the focus. So basically there's going to be more pink on this claw as opposed to the other claw. And there is a lot of finessing going on as far as how we're pushing these colors around and how far the pink will go versus the purple, and how far the blend will go, and all these things. So it's not really quite shown here, but I do end up basically kind of working the color. I push that pink pretty far, almost to the shoulder on that arm, and then decide against it, and so I bring it back a bit more. And of course we are getting the undersides of the claw as well, and then blend that out like what we've done there. Again, I'm using the shade wash brush. I use the smaller brush to apply the pink, but then I blend it out with this larger brush, and any kind of larger brush. When you're doing this sort of thing, if you're not dipping it right into the color, I highly recommend that you use a damp, clean brush to feather out the color, as it were. Again, there's various techniques you can use to achieve this kind of blend really, really quickly. This is something that I would highly recommend any of you out there, if you've never tried this kind of technique before, this wet on wet, definitely give it a shot, as it is a lot of fun and a very useful technique to know as you advance as a painter, because for me personally, it is not really the end of the painting process. It is more or less like you can see here how I'm just basically using this pretty much like a sketch. I'm just kind of roughing out my idea on where I want color transitions and things of that nature. I'm not too worried about my end result. The paint is a little bit thin because there is a little bit of residual moisture in the bristles, but otherwise I'm not laying this paint very heavily here, so I can just simply work it in. And as long as you're fast, you don't need any kind of additives or retardants in the paint to slow down the drying process, which is something you can use. But if you want to linger and accomplish it kind of in one go, you can do that as well. I'm throwing a little bit on his little spiky mouth bits and up on his forward portion of his carapace. I decide that it's a little too intense, and so I just blend it back a little bit more. I go back and forth. Again, when you are doing wet blending, you do find yourself going back and forth quite a bit, and that is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, working out where you want to push that color. Here you can see I want these little spiky bits to be a little bit more on the magenta side of things, but not all the way. And I do want to have this transition in there. On the back side of his crest, I also apply a little bit more of that Screamer Pink, and then just very quickly just blend it right out. And again, it's very, very straightforward. This is not a very difficult technique. It just takes a little bit of practice, but it's just like every other aspect of miniature painting. It just takes practice. Next, we're going to jump over to some Black Templar Citadel contrast. We're going to use some contrast medium. I'm going to slap a little bit onto my palette, add about, I think, 2 drops. And then we're going to give that a nice thorough mix. I usually mix until I do not see any marbling in the color. Marbling being that there's some, you can see, eddies of stronger tone and weaker tone. And so I want to look for a very homogeneous type of look to it. And then I apply it over the center of the carapace. I try not to go too far down into the rest of the carapace. I clean off my brush after I lay a little bit more, and you can see here how it looks kind of watery and thin. It's because I'm basically feathering it out as it transitions down. Here on the legs, I want a little bit deeper color in towards the body, and I will also apply it on the joins between like his crab claws and his joints and things of that nature, and just get a little bit more contrast. Again, this is really entirely just, to build up a little bit more contrast on the model. Again, it is very, very thin tone. So there is quite a bit of purple still showing through. It doesn't quite seem so on the camera here, but there is quite a bit of that purple tone. Once it's dried, of course, you can see quite a bit of the color that still remains, and it's still fine. This was just simply to bring that tone down a bit. Screamer Pink with some Lahmian medium next. And with this, basically, we're going to just clean up some of our transitions and also start to incorporate some texture onto those claws and some of the little doodads around the little fella. And with this, I'm going to concentrate most of the color on the inside portion, the pinchy part of the claw, and also on that long leading edge on the outside of his big portion of his claw. On some of the segments in his arm, I was also going to build up some more color there. Again, this is a very thin glaze. I'm working with a nice detail brush here that allows me to, have quite a bit of control. And the biggest part, again, with glazing is where you finish your brush stroke. That is where the largest deposit of paint will accrue. So always be mindful of how you're moving your brush across a surface, because it does matter. Your brush strokes do matter. And you can see here, like on the little spikes individually, you can see how I'm bringing the brush stroke from inside the carapace and finishing at the tip of the the spiky. And that's so that deposit of color gets more intense towards the ends. And that's really glazing in a nutshell. And I'm sure anybody who's been watching these videos for any length of time knows that this is pretty much how it goes. And of course, you can build as many layers as you really need. I'm also adding a little bit here onto the knuckles of his legs here, these right before the big spiky needle things, the ends of his crab legs. I don't know what do you call that, but I don't know crab anatomy. Come on, people. And now, here's the big one. Can you all guess the inspiration for this crab? That's the big one. Naggaroth Knight is next. We are going to use a little bit of Lahmian medium. Slap a little bit onto our palette. Add 2 drops, I think. And then we are going to give that a nice thorough mix again till we see no marbling. And with this, I'm just going to glaze up some of the transitions on the legs, and especially where I had deposited quite a bit of that black. I'm just putting in some of the beginnings of the transitions where highlights will accrue, and on the digits of those crab legs, and anywhere else, especially on the big part of his carapace or on his arms. I will also, as we move forward, I will also take a very, like this generous amount of water. I slap it onto my palette and take just a little bit of the purple and turn it into a very thin glaze. And I will push that right into some of those recesses, just again to push that transition a little further back. It wasn't that it wasn't entirely bright enough, it's just I want to go for a bit more of a contrasty kind of look. And so with these very, very thin glazes, we could have used medium in this instance to thin this down into a glaze. I didn't really feel like it was entirely necessary. And I just used my paint pot water to push some of these glazes around. And again, it was my dirty paint water. So, there is other colors in there, but it doesn't really affect, especially at this fine a thin layer of color. The dominant color will prevail in these instances. And you can see here again, I'm just pushing some of the contrast, building up some of that intense color again, as I do want this to be quite bright. Xeris purple is next. Well, not bright, but you know what I mean. Lamian medium, and we're going to slap a little bit onto our palette. We're going to use a drop or two. I think it's 2 drops. Give it a thorough mix till we see no marbling. And with this, again, we are going to put in some highlights, and we're glazing this in because I do want to have a bit of a gradient of color there. And with these processes of the glazing here, basically what I'm doing and what is not shown on the camera is that there's probably probably 2 or 3 layers on each phase. So each of those little legs, I've probably gone over them 2 or 3 times doing this exact same process. But when you are going for these kind of gradients and you are glazing your highlights, you definitely want to lay a little bit down and work smaller every time you lay another layer down. Otherwise, you're not going to get a gradient. You're just going to get this kind of, tide mark kind of mess. We're going to grab a little bit of water, grab a little dollop of that paint, Xeris purple, glaze again. And with this, again, you can see I'm just simply pushing the color. And all I'm doing is I'm just kind of marrying some of these transitions together. The wet on wet blend, like I said, was a bit more like a sketch, but also it's basically a decent foundation to start building. And it also, if you have the capacity to, see where you're going with it, a wet on wet blend really helps you visualize your end goals, and it helps you to see your end result without actually having to go all the way to the end of the process and then discover that it's not not where you wanted it, right? Emperor's Children is next. Lamian medium is next. And we're going to slap a little bit onto the palette. We're going to add just a tiny bit of Screamer Pink. You see there's just a tiny amount of mixing into this. It's probably closer to like a 2-to-1. 2 Emperor's Children to 1 Screamer Pink. I do want to have it predominantly be, Emperor's Children, like a light pink. Very, very carefully, I'm catching just the tips and tops of these little spiky details. And of course, the claws will also get most of the interior of each of those little claws. And of course, I will glaze a little bit on the peaks or the tips of the pinchy claws as well. You can see there I'm just drawing in some more highlights and everything like that. Initially, I was thinking of creating a bit more texture on there to like kind of really get like a striated kind of look. But then I decided against it and I thought, nah, let's just have some fun. Go with some nice bold color there. Again, I really was thinking more of what's going to draw the eye in. Grab a generous amount of water, grab just a little bit of that mixture. And again, I'm going to start glazing in some of these transitions here. And again, you can see we are just simply finishing off our brush stroke where we want to deposit the larger amount of color. So that's why you can see that I start on the inside of the claw and then bring it forward. On each of the spikes, the same process as before. Start closer in towards the body and finish the brush stroke out towards the tip of the spiky. On these spikes, I simply just bring it at about halfway on the carapace on the back. I do run with the striated kind of look. It does have a bit of texture there, but otherwise this is entirely brushstroke to get that really kind of, striated kind of look on it. And then of course some little dots here and there just to, indicate some of those little finer areas. And then I also, on these little orbs before his finger toe nail thing, basically I catch the underside of that. It's just an aesthetic choice. I could have highlighted it on the high point, but I decided against that. So, it's just choices we make. These are just, I'm not following, I'm working from a picture of an actual crab, and and it is the inspiration for this whole color scheme, for the most part. Emperor's Children, all on its lonesome. Lamian Medium is next. Slap a little bit onto the palette. We're going to add 2 drops, I believe. And with this, we're going to give it a thorough mixing, and we are basically going to go into those claws again. We're going to catch just those very tips and those little, I don't know what those little dots are inside his claw, but otherwise, yeah, we're just basically going to catch the tops of those, and we're just bringing, again, more and more intensity towards the inside of the claws, because, again, I do want to have those be the prominent feature that catches somebody's eye. Unfortunately, with this model, his eyes are actually kind of obscured. You can see them just above his little kind of mouth doodad thingies. I don't know what those are, but and then, of course, he also has that Deepkin rune on his forehead, and we'll take care of that later. Again, you can see we're just simply catching just the tips of these little spikies. Really just the tall ones get more pink, and of course the carapace on the back. It's a very, very minimal highlight we're doing there. Just barely touching some of these areas. Again, if I need to, which is why with every brush stroke I'm still staying within a linear kind of motion, where I'm kind of starting on the inside part and drawing it and ending it towards the edge of that carapace to give me that striated look on the carapace. And so here we are, with primarily most of the model done, I guess. And so in the next video, we will continue our look and we'll finish off this model, and hopefully you guys are getting a kick out of this one. Big thank you to my patrons. Without their support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below, and you'll be helping me out a great deal by allowing me to continue to do what it is that I do, which is educate and inform, and sometimes entertain. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.